Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and joining us in this segment is Mark Morano. He's the producer of Climate Hustle. He's also the publisher of Climate Depot. That's a great source, climatedepot.com, a great source of information about global warming, Eco News Center. It was founded back in 2009. Of course, he's also communications director for the Committee for Constructive Tomorrow, executive editor and chief correspondent there at Climate Depot. I want to talk to him about where he sees the Trump administration going with the EPA. As we have a nomination for the head of the EPA by Donald Trump. It's a former attorney general out of Oklahoma, and he has been one of the people at the forefront of challenging the power grabs of the EPA. And here's the latest one that happened today. Today, we've had the EPA now move after Chrysler, and instantly their stock dropped 15% because they know that this is going to be a lot of money. This is the same thing they accused VW of last summer, cheating on their emissions tests. Okay? Now, was anybody killed with this? Absolutely not. In spite of the lies that we were told by Lisa Jackson and then Congressman Markey, now Senator Markey, nobody is dying from this stuff, folks. They're not dying. We got an article here from Climate Depot where the New York Times is saying, as Donald Trump denies climate change, these kids are dying from it. That's seriously their headline. No, that's not true. People aren't dying from this. At the same time they were putting it out, as I mentioned, they were hooking people up, trying to cheat on their test, looking to see if they could get adverse reactions from people showing that diesel fuel was going to harm them. They literally hooked people up at UNC, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, hooked them up to the tailpipes of diesel engines. That's the kind of cheating that the EPA does on their tests. We tried to stop that. We tried to get an injunction against it. Absolutely amazing that our own government wouldn't stop harmful testing on humans, testing that was designed to make them sick so they could increase their regulation, so they could grow their bureaucratic empire. Isn't that amazing? I mean, after Tuskegee and all the other things that we've seen, that they would allow that to continue to go on, and yet they do. And we've seen the government do other types of testing, releasing things in the New York subways. But today, we see the EPA going after Fiat Chrysler. We got an article on Infowars.com from Kit Daniels. They say, you're trying to fool our emission tests. That's not nice. Remember, as we go back, remember we've had situations where there have been large fines, multi-million-dollar fines against people like Ford when they had the exploding Pintos. People would hit the Pintos in the back, and they would explode. Or they would have a situation where they had SUV rollovers. Or they would have airbags that were killing small children, and they wouldn't let you turn those off. Remember that? Then they've got millions of airbags that are being recalled that have actually killed a lot of people because they have failed and go off and shoot metal fragments into you, like a shotgun going off in your face. And they've killed people. So in all these cases, the exploding Pintos, the SUVs rolling over in the early days of SUVs, the airbags that killed small children, the airbags that are killing people now that they won't let you turn off until you can get it replaced. In all of these situations, people have died. Nobody died from these emission scandals, and yet they're trying to put Volkswagen out of business. And the reason they're doing it, folks, is not because they care about air quality. They're using this just like they're using climate change to advance their globalist climate change agenda. They have to have a global crisis so they can have a way to fund a global government. And that's what's truly behind this. Now, as this article from Kit Daniel, they point out that if VW retroactively complies with this to fix these vehicles, as Eric Peters points out, he says the truly grotesque thing is that if the mileage drops as expected, the cars at issue will emit more of the harmful emissions that they've been concerned about. And that's what we've seen with the corporate CAFE standards. Because they gave a differential, when they created these things back in 1978, they gave a differential between cars and trucks. People have started using trucks as cars because one of the reasons is they can get bigger engines and they can do other things with them, and they aren't subject to these types of regulations. And so what you wind up having is a situation where the total fuel economy has gone down because people have switched. So let's go to Mark Morano. I didn't see him up on the board here. I wasn't sure that we had connected with him, but we now have Mark Morano, producer of Climate Hustle and publisher of Climate Depot. Thank you for joining us, Mark.
Thank you, David. Happy to be here. Yes, you're completely accurate about the EPA, and even worse than what you're describing, like about the Chrysler attacks by the EPA and their alleged emissions violations. The Republican Congress a few years back, even under George Bush, they have statutorily killed the SUV in America unless Donald Trump's administration and the new Congress tries to change it. And what I mean by that is, you mentioned the corporate average fuel economy standards. They're trying to merge those or bring them in line with what vehicles have been, which means we're talking about Ford F-150 pickups, Jeeps, everything else having to move to aluminum, much lighter weight, the shrinking, the downsizing. The reason people have always liked SUVs are at threat.
Yes.
And so that's one of the other things they're doing, aside from hassling them with these emission alleged violations. They're now coming after them for their weight, size, materials that they're made out of. It's a way of essentially re-engineering American society in the face of global warming. And they're doing this from everything from our light bulb to our appliances. Consumer Reports even says that high-end washing machines don't perform as well as low-end washing machines of 15 years ago, brand new ones, because of all the energy department, Energy Star, sucking all the available power out of these machines. So they're forced to make them lighter, lightweight, lighter duty. It just goes on, and it goes all the way up to our population, whether we can eat beef, our transportation, carbon taxes. So Donald Trump is probably the greatest threat to this agenda that's occurred in the history of the entire modern environmental movement since 1970.
Oh, absolutely. As you point out, even what we eat, everything that they have put out here, and there really is a globalist aspect to all this that we understand. You've put together a list of, back in 2008, you had a list even then of 650 plus scientists who are dissenting from this so-called science of man-made global warming. I mean, they like to say that there's nobody that dissents from this. It's a settled issue. We can't even talk about it, because when they get put up against the facts, they don't want to debate them. They just resort to censorship, resort to the idea of arguing from authority. And so it's great when you put together a list of people like that. We just had a professor from Georgia Tech saying, I can't take this anymore. I've got too many knives in my back. I'm getting out of this business. They don't want to hear it. And yet we see them turn this around and say, isn't this horrible? Donald Trump wants to know what these people's position in the EPA is on climate change. He's going to do some kind of a purge. Well, they've been doing a purge, a political purge all along with this stuff. We're trying to get a situation where we got real science done, and this is not about real science. This is about pushing an agenda and not allowing other people to push back against it.
Yeah, you mentioned Judith Curry, is the climatologist from Georgia Tech. She's featured in Climate Hustle, my film, which is out this year. 2016 it came out, and it's actually, we're going to be making it available very shortly with Al Gore's sequel coming out here in a couple weeks.
And of course, I'll tell people too, they can get Climate Hustle. We sell that in our store, so I'll give that a plug here. There you can see it. You can buy that at InfoWars store. A great film.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and Judith Curry, the climatologist who just resigned, she was a tenured professor. She just had it. She used to be the chair of her department, the climatology department at Georgia Tech, and she basically said that she cannot play this game anymore. And what happened was she was a former believer, for lack of a better word, of the global warming science, aligned herself with the United Nations climate view. And then we had the big ClimateGate scandal, and then she started questioning, and then she's become essentially a full-blown skeptic now. And because of that, she has faced vilification from her peers. She's all kinds of difficulty getting published. She talks about how the publishing of climate studies comes from universities and foundations and the government. They only want funding that goes one direction. In other words, if you want to get funding and have a career as a climate scientist, you better toe the line that our politicians and our culture is demanding, that global warming is dangerous and we need more central planning of government to solve it. Otherwise, you can't be a scientist. And that's what we're facing here. And we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. calling for climate skeptics to be thrown in jail. Bill Nye, the science guy, thinks that's a great idea too. We have him on videos talking about what a great idea and how there are skeptics affecting his quality of life. Yeah. Bill Nye, and by the way, global warming people have blamed the drought in California on global warming. Now, thank God they're actually getting enough rains and precipitation to actually recover from the drought almost completely. Now they're saying that the floods in California are caused by global warming.
Anything bad. The fact
they blamed floods and droughts and hurricanes and tornadoes on global cooling in the 1970s. There's no consistency here whatsoever.
You just mentioned RFK Jr., and I was talking about him in the segment before you came on about vaccines. Yeah. Now, Trump may use him to reveal the truth about vaccines and about pharmaceutical industries. But I think that's the genius of what Trump has been doing. As he's been picking these cabinet positions, we look at him and it's like, ooh, look at what this guy said about this. And it's like, oh, that's very inconsistent with what Trump has said. And yet he's picking people who will work with him on particular issues, like that they share a point of view on, like he does with RFK Jr. on vaccines. And yet when it comes to the EPA head, he goes and gets somebody that the New York Times is just flipping out. They call him a climate change denialist. And that's the key thing, is that they don't talk about you as being a skeptic if you don't agree with them. They talk about you as being a denialist. So you're denying their religion. You are an infidel. I guess we should embrace it as you and I are climate change infidels, aren't we, Mark?
That's right. Yeah, they say, when we say, Michael Crichton, the famous author, had said global warming is a religion, environmental, and they always say, oh, no, it's not. But then we find out the head of the United Nations Climate Panel, a man named Rajendra Pachauri, when he stepped down over a sexual harassment scandal, he actually said, quote, global warming is my religion, unquote.
Yes.
So we know what is motivating these people. And you're absolutely right. Donald Trump is doing amazing. You could never get, and here's what I never understood about the never Trumpers who allege to be conservatives. If you get all the previous Republican nominees since Reagan, you have George H.W. Bush, who was an absolute disaster when it came to climate change issues in the United Nations and environmentalism. He set up the entire UN Foundation for the Global Warming Treaties with the Rio Earth Summit in 1992.
Mm-hmm.
You have Bob Dole, who was so weak on these issues, you can't even really comment. He was just sort of, it was his turn, so they nominated him. You have John McCain, who was nominated in 2008, and he was actually a sponsor of these climate bills. You have George W. Bush, who rubber stamped every UN report, kept the funding coming, and literally accepted all the science and never said a skeptical word out of his mouth. So George W. Bush did that. Then you had Mitt Romney, who had many of Obama's advisors working for him. So when it comes to Donald Trump, particularly on environment and climate, he is the greatest breath of fresh air of any Republican nominee that you could even conceive of. So
that's why they hate him so much on this issue, just as on other issues. He's the only one who is not in league with both the Republican and the Democrat establishment, as you just ran down that list of former presidents and presidential candidates. I mean, look at Mitt Romney. He was with Obama on Obamacare. They were going to get that through after the 2012 election, regardless of which way it went. He had already put that through with Ted Kennedy in Massachusetts. They put in Romney Care, which was fundamentally the same thing as Obamacare. So they know how to get their people in on both the Republican and the Democrat ticket. And this time through, Donald Trump broke through that. And he is coming from the point of view that the rest of us are looking at to try to break this lock on power that both the Democrat and Republican establishment have had.
Yeah, and I think if you go back, this is probably the most successful, if anyone can actually measure success, of a president-elect's term, meaning this is the most successful president-elect period that we've ever had. I mean, this is just a phenomenal time. If any Republican had doubts or hesitation about Donald Trump, yesterday they were removed when he stared at the CNN reporter and actually said, "You are fake news."
Wasn't that a great moment?
Inconceivable of even Ronald Reagan to go that far. I mean,
that's what I was just going to say. You know, Ronald Reagan really, in the primaries, the moment that Ronald Reagan had, if you remember, was when he stood up and he said, "I paid for this microphone." Remember that? Yes. And he took charge. You know, he was right, and he stood up. He wasn't going to be cowed down by these people. He stood up for what was right, and he showed that he had a backbone. And boy, I tell you what, if you didn't know that Donald Trump had a backbone and you didn't know that he was going to stand up by now, you saw that yesterday. And boy, he was absolutely right to shut down that guy Acosta from CNN. The arrogance and the sense of entitlement that guy had, shouting at him and saying, you know, you can't do this. I mean, it's like, yeah, just watch me. I mean, it was amazing.
Yes, and so what this does is, because Donald Trump literally doesn't care. And the next thing I'd like to see Trump do, by the way, is in the press room. Right now, the whole first row of the White House press room is reserved for the usual suspects: ABC, NBC, CNN. They need to clear all that out and replace it, with all the new sources of news, and just say goodbye to them. Maybe give them one chair they can rotate. You can call them the quirky alternative media or something like that. But they deserve not 1 ounce of respect. Their entire mission right now is to impeach Donald Trump, and they're going to be working with every enemy of Donald Trump to try to bring his presidency down, as this most recent ridiculous news story that they tried to pass from BuzzFeed and CNN. But I think what's most important here when it comes to these issues of climate and environment, Republicans, in fact, I believe almost every single former Republican EPA director came out and supported President Obama's climate policies, his climate regulations through the EPA.
Look at what they did with the Paris agreement just last year. They go over there and they're posturing, saying, well, we're going to have something to say about it. And what they did was they immediately, within 3 days with their omnibus, they funded it. The Republicans funded it. So, yeah.
All these former directors, what happens is when Republicans get in office, Republican presidents and obviously senators and congressmen, they don't want to be seen as against the environment. I worked in the Environment and Public Works Committee. I would see great conservative senators, top staff, show up at meetings and say, we got to be careful. We can't look like we're against the environment when it comes to this climate bill coming up. They'd be no backbone, and they would not accept the premise that the climate activists in the United Nations have given us the information. They admit we have the top UN official named Otto Edenhofer actually says, the vice chair of this climate panel, actually say it's not about environmental policy. We will redistribute wealth by climate policy. This is no longer about the environment. They're actually open about what they want to do. They talk openly of global governance. In the film Climate Hustle, we actually have Al Gore talking about that, climate bills lead to global governance. That's what they're looking for, a centrally planned thing, where we had Nancy Pelosi went to China in 2009, and she said we need a complete inventory on every aspect of our lives in order to fight global warming. And they've got every aspect of our lives covered, from our home thermostat to our vehicles, to our appliances, to light bulbs, to what we eat, to how we travel, to how we live, to our energy choices, even down. And we actually, in the film, feature the most frightening thing of all, an NYU professor talking about how we're going to genetically shrink human beings, genetic engineering to solve global warming, and give skeptics and people who don't want to go along psychiatric drugs and make them more malleable to the government agenda. I mean, this is not something people should be not angry.
Well, that's right. It's not just our jobs. It's not just our standard of living. It's also life expectancy. and it is globalism. It's them taking over control of our economy. And if they say it's a global situation, why are they giving exemptions to China on this? Stay with us. We're going to be right back with Mark Moreno. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight. We're going to go back to Mark Moreno in just a moment. Just wanted to remind you that we have our 2017 Make America Great Again, Make Our Bodies Great Again, actually, our American bodies. You can also use this if you're not American. It's a great supplements. We have discounts of 20 to 30% off. Things like Brain Force, Super Male Vitality, Survival Shield X2, our Nascent Iodine, those are all 30% off. Also, our tactical nanotechnology body armor, state-of-the-art, patented form of carbon nanotube technology makes it the lightest, the strongest, and most flexible body armor on the market. Even though it's only a quarter-inch thick, this body armor is field-tested to stop the most powerful pistol rounds in production. It's waterproof, super lightweight, made in the USA, comes with a 20-year warranty, and as I pointed out before, we have the full vest that you can buy. Those are more expensive. The very cheapest thing we have is also very effective to put into your backpack, into your luggage, and that is a rectangular, it's got rounded edges on it. You can insert that into your backpack, and that makes a great shield if you happen to be at a Fort Lauderdale airport shooting or any of the other gun-free killing zones that our government continues to create, like Chicago, for example. You might want to, if you live in Chicago, you might want to get one of those and put it in your kid's backpack, because that's the world the Democrats have created for us. Also, we're talking to Mark Moreno, and he has created a film, Climate Hustle, that is also available at the InfoWars store. And Mark, one of the things I see here is the New York Times bragging about the Sundance Film Festival and the fact that the theme this year is climate change. And of course, Robert Redford just tells us that just happens to be coincidental. We like to stay free of politics, he said. And yet the key thing that they're promoting is the next Al Gore convenient lie, an inconvenient sequel. So if people want to have the information that they can show people to counter Al Gore's propaganda film, I think they really need to see your opposing view, and that is Climate Depot. We don't have a problem arguing our point of view with these other people. They're the ones who are trying to shut down a discussion of this. They're the ones who are trying to censor it at academia, but we want to have that debate.
Yeah, we absolutely do. In fact, the film is interesting because it actually profiles politically left-wing scientists who endorsed President Obama, who voted for Al Gore, but are appalled by their science views. We have an Ivy League professor, and we go through that whole thing to show that it's the left wing now that is examining it, and they believe that essentially global warming has hijacked the real environmental movement. The real environmental movement used to be so concerned about clean air, clean water, conservation, and now it's all arguing about these arcane arguments about how much CO2 is in the atmosphere. And we show in the film that geologically speaking, the Earth is in a CO2 famine. In other words, CO2 is near all-time lows, and the Earth is one of the coldest temperatures it's ever been. We've in very few periods in our Earth's history have we had ice at both poles. So we're in the 10% coldest part of the Earth's history living right now. So the idea that we are the control knob of the climate does not hold up. And Bill Nye just recently said that we basically need the UN climate treaty so that we'll have less droughts. These liberals actually believe that EPA regulations and UN treaties can control the Earth's thermostat, hurricanes, tornadoes. It's beyond absurd. It's akin to old witchcraft that they believe legislation can alter the weather, and they believe used to believe witches can alter the weather.
It's amazing. It's like I said yesterday, Mark. It's like these guys flipped a coin. Heads it's going to warm, tails it's going to cool. Yeah. they made the wrong call. When they started out the first Earth Day, they were telling us we're heading into a new ice age, and then they flipped it and went the other direction. But now they've been shown that that's not working either. All their predictions, all their dire predictions, have fallen on the ground. And I think it's very important for people to get your film. Again, that's Climate Hustle. We sell it at InfoWars store. Yes, it's a great thing. You need to have this debate, folks. And I always looked at the news. I would get people on either end of the spectrum, and I would see what both of them had to say and then make up my mind. And we want to have that debate. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark Moreno, climatedepot.com. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.
InfoWars has more than 15 YouTube channels and about 3 million subscribers. Our main channel has 1.854 or 1,854,000 plus subscribers. Now, they've been gaming the system for a long time to shut down nationalistic or patriotic media, saying we're right-wingers, saying we're extremists. Well, it doesn't matter who we are. We have a right to free speech, don't we? As long as we don't violate the rules. Well, now Zuckerberg has come out and said he's going to restrict conservative news like Communist China does, calling it fake news. And Google, that owns YouTube, has announced, and they've done it now 2 weeks ago, that they're going to basically make you click the bell in your notifications. We're going to show you how to do that, or you won't get all the channels that you've subscribed to, and you won't get the videos. Now, why are they doing this? It's more than just censoring. They want you to see the videos that they feed you below and beside the videos you're looking at that are corporately sponsored so they make more money. They're taking the you out of YouTube. So we're in this information war, and it's more important than ever that you promote the videos, that you like the videos, and that you send them on to others. Because the answer to the attempt to shut us down and restrict free speech that's openly now happening is for us to redouble our efforts. We're winning the culture war as true classical liberals that made this country great. We're restoring the Renaissance. So again, if you want to get our videos, so you can make your decision whether you want to see them or not. After all, that's why you subscribed. YouTube's had this since they started 12 years ago or whatever it was. And they're fundamentally changing it so you don't get it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is promoting fake news and trash news and establishment news. It's killing real independent news. But we, the people, by taking action, can break the back of this system. So please click on the bell so you get the notifications and so you get in your feed the videos and channels you've subscribed to. I'm Alex Jones for Infowars.com.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and joining us in this segment is Mark Moreno. He's the producer of Climate Hustle. He's also the publisher of Climate Depot. That's a great source, climatedepot.com, a great source of information about global warming, Eco News Center. It was founded back in 2009. Of course, he's also communications director for the Committee for Constructive Tomorrow, executive editor and chief correspondent there at Climate Depot. I want to talk to him about where he sees the Trump administration going with the EPA. As we have a nomination for the head of the EPA by Donald Trump. It's a former attorney general out of Oklahoma, and he has been one of the people at the forefront of challenging the power grabs of the EPA. And here's the latest one that happened today. Today, we've had the EPA now move after Chrysler, and instantly their stock dropped 15% because they know that this is going to be a lot of money. This is the same thing they accused VW of last summer, cheating on their emissions tests. Okay? Now, was anybody killed with this? Absolutely not. In spite of the lies that we were told by Lisa Jackson and then Congressman Markey, now Senator Markey, nobody is dying from this stuff, folks. They're not dying. We got an article here from Climate Depot where the New York Times is saying, as Donald Trump denies climate change, these kids are dying from it. That's seriously their headline. No, that's not true. People aren't dying from this. At the same time they were putting it out, as I mentioned, they were hooking people up, trying to cheat on their test, looking to see if they could get adverse reactions from people showing that diesel fuel was going to harm them. They literally hooked people up at UNC, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, hooked them up to the tailpipes of diesel engines. That's the kind of cheating that the EPA does on their tests. We tried to stop that. We tried to get an injunction against it. Absolutely amazing that our own government wouldn't stop harmful testing on humans, testing that was designed to make them sick so they could increase their regulation, so they could grow their bureaucratic empire. Isn't that amazing? I mean, after Tuskegee and all the other things that we've seen, that they would allow that to continue to go on, and yet they do. And we've seen the government do other types of testing, releasing things in the New York subways. But today, we see the EPA going after Fiat Chrysler. We got an article on Infowars.com from Kit Daniels. They say, you're trying to fool our emission tests. That's not nice. Remember, as we go back, we've had situations where there have been large fines, multi-million-dollar fines against people like Ford when they had the exploding Pintos. People would hit the Pintos in the back, and they would explode. Or they would have a situation where they had SUV rollovers. Or they would have airbags that were killing small children, and they wouldn't let you turn those off. Remember that? Then they've got millions of airbags that are being recalled that have actually killed a lot of people because they have failed and go off and shoot metal fragments into you, like a shotgun going off in your face. And they've killed people. So in all these cases, the exploding Pintos, the SUVs rolling over in the early days of SUVs, the airbags that killed small children, the airbags that are killing people now that they won't let you turn off until you can get it replaced. In all of these situations, people have died. Nobody died from these emission scandals. And yet they're trying to put Volkswagen out of business. And the reason they're doing it